Alright, hello everybody. I am Kenny, and we are getting set to get this thing started. This is going to be a series of bingo races of Assault Android Cactus, followed by a campaign plus race afterwards. We have 9 people in 3 groups of 3 for the bingo races, and we will have 3 separate bingo cards. These will be done back to back to back. The first race has sort of shorter challenges, and as we get into the later races, we will have like more and more involved challenges as the day progresses. For those not familiar with this game, it is a top-down twin-stick shooter. Assault Android Cactus Plus currently is available on Switch and PC. PC just recently getting the update for Plus. The game is also available in its base form on PS4 and Xbox One. And it has a demo available on all of those platforms, I believe. So if this is the sort of thing that looks interesting to people, then you should all definitely go and check it out after the stream. And the way that this bingo is going to work, this is just simple bingo in terms of players just need to complete one row or one column. This isn't double action or anything like that. And we'll be revealing the card shortly. We are getting everyone set up right now. And I've just seen the countdown, so races should be off momentarily. So once we get this card visible, I will explain sort of what we're seeing in it. You will see a lot of complete a level or a boss with a specific character. You will see S+ in some cases, which refers to the ranking system in the game. When you complete each level, you receive a rank. It ranges from D, C, B, A to S or S+. S+ing a stage requires keeping your chain consistent throughout and never dropping it, which involves killing enemies at least once every 2.5 seconds, I believe, and not taking a knockdown. Knockdowns in this game aren't the end of the world, but if you're going for S or S+, then they absolutely are. And you'll see that some of our runners, at least, will be playing with the S+ indicator in their HUD. So if you look at the top center to the left of the battery meter, that is a clear indication of whether or not they are still eligible for S+ rank. So right now we see Les playing on Hive with Cactus, we see Toucan Sam playing on Descent with Cactus, and we see Marshmallow playing against Embryo, also with Cactus. So you can get an idea of which spaces on the bingo board they're probably going for right now. But as we progress, we will inevitably be seeing different parts of the game, different bosses, different playable characters. This game has a total of 9 playable characters, and each one has a unique playstyle, so the game really doesn't get old. It's got a lot of variety in it to keep you interested. So it looks like Marshmallow indeed just filled in complete Embryo with Cactus, as we just saw the stream catch up to that a moment later. Meanwhile, Sam just completed Descent with Cactus using VPC2. Let me explain what VPC is. VPC is short for Virtual Player Count. So this game has unlockable modifiers, and what Virtual Player Count does is this game supports local co-op. And normally when you're playing with multiple players, the game ramps up the difficulty. It makes enemies more bullet spongy, and it spawns more enemies. And so what Virtual Player Count does is it amps up the difficulty as if you were playing with that many players, but you're still playing single player. So VPC2 means you're playing 1 player, but you're playing with the difficulty of 2 players. Meanwhile, it looks like Les just completed a bunch of challenges at once. Curious that Reach a Chain of 400 was actually in 2 places. That's interesting. Complete Hive with Cactus is what he was working on. He managed to keep chain the entire time, so that allowed him to fill in multiple squares right now because there were multiple chain conditions on the board. Meanwhile, now we've got Marshmallow in Filament with Licorice. Licorice has a cannon that shoots much more slowly than Cactus's, but its bullets are much more powerful, and her secondary attack is this teleport and slash. So you'll see every so often that Marshmallow ends up zipping around the board a bit, and in many cases insta-killing things afterwards. Meanwhile, we've got Les moving on to fight Justice, which is the third boss in the game, with Cactus, and we've got Toucan Sam on Influx on the bottom left. Influx is a really interesting level that is one of the first real demonstrations of like the dynamic nature of some of the levels in this game, in how they can morph between enemy waves. Meanwhile, it looks like Marshmallow is going to be moving on, selecting Cactus again, and also going for the Justice fight, so we're going to see a couple of those. And it looks like they're going for the S plus Justice with Cactus card. S plusing Justice is a little bit tricky, because aside from obviously not being able to take a knockdown, you also need to be a little bit careful in Justice's final phase, because it's very easy to accidentally break chain by not destroying some of the, let's call them head mines that he throws. In the third phase, he will shoot lasers from his head, and twice during that phase, he will actually take off his head and throw it, and it becomes a mine, and he switches to another head, which fires a different type of laser. And you actually have to destroy those mines in order to keep your chain going in many instances, unless you're really, really fast. So we've got our our runners at the top of the screen both working on that. Meanwhile, Toucan Sam is playing Capacitor with Lemon, which is the bottom center card on the bingo board. Complete Capacitor with Lemon. No rank requirement there, just needs to finish it. I'm kind of surprised that only Les went for the chain requirements yet, because given how prominent that is on the board, there's 3 squares that you can immediately check off if you keep your chain up. And doing that on Hive was a really smart thing to do, because Hive has the introduction of wasps, which are these really tiny enemies that don't do a lot of damage, but they always come in swarms. So it's a really good candidate level for getting a good chain. Meanwhile, it looks like Sam is going to be going for that bottom row straight across. The one real challenge of that bottom row is going to be S plusing Centrifuge with Cactus, because it's really easy to take a knockdown on that. But we'll see what happens. Meanwhile, it looks like our top 2 runners are still hacking away at this embryo fight. Not embryo, this Justice fight. So I'm assuming that Sam will most likely be going to Vestibula next, which is the second zone boss. As you can see, he just switched from Zone 1 to Zone 2 on the... there's like this overworld map that you can travel across in the game. And so Zone 1 has a red theme, Zone 2 has a green theme. And sure enough, he's going for Vestibula, which is the Zone 2 boss at this point. So all of our players fighting bosses at the moment. And I guess I can go into more detail about how these bosses work. So Vestibula alternates between phases where she rolls up into a ball and just has a bunch of wasps swarm at you, and phases where she opens up and shoots giant novelty flowers, as Cactus likes to call them, or we'll also see some vines later on. And Vestibula is a 6-phase boss. Embryo also being a 6-phase boss. He was the first boss that we saw being played earlier. Justice is the third boss of the game and only has 3 phases, which presents an interesting perceived difficulty spike, just because when you're fighting bosses, you only get battery pickups at the end of each boss phase, and due to Justice only being 3 phases, that means you get far less battery pickups during his fight than you do in the first 2 boss fights. And the way the battery works is it's strictly a timer. That battery gauge at the top center of the screen counts down. It's effectively a 60-second timer, but in normal stages, every time you defeat a certain number of enemies or like a certain density of enemies, one of them will drop a battery that gives you some time back on that timer. And with bosses, every time that you complete a phase, which is indicated by the little gaps in the boss meter at the bottom of the screen where it says vitality, every time you complete one of those phases, the boss will drop a battery. Meanwhile, Sam is indeed moving on into Centrifuge. I think he forgot to mark complete Vespula with Cactus. I'm just leaving a message in the chat. I don't know if spectator messages come up for players, but hopefully they do. But we know that he just did that. So Sam is effectively on his last square that he needs. Meanwhile, the other two players are going really hard for this S+ Justice with Cactus. It looks as if Marshmallow is moving on to something else. I didn't see the square get marked. So, maybe deciding to cut his losses. Looks like Marshmallow is going to fight Vespula. But let's see if Les can clutch out this Justice fight. He's in the last phase. Oh no, he just got a knockdown from one of the, effectively one of the Hellos. Hello is the name of the sort of helicopter sidekick that one of the characters has that actually serves as a weapon. And the Justice fight is the first time that you really see that in action. Meanwhile, to explain this level that Sam is on, it's called Centrifuge for a reason. You'll notice that the sides constantly spin, and then they stop and dump out enemies. It's a really fun level to play. A lot of people have had a lot of fun, not only playing it normally, but also with virtual player count, VPC, amped up. Because it's just a constant, like, deluge of enemies that you can more or less kind of tear through with certain characters. So Marshmallow is into phase 4 of the Vespula fight. It looks like Marshmallow is going for the mega weapons. Meanwhile, Sam is indeed done, so GG to Sam for completing a row down there. Meanwhile, it looks like Marshmallow is... Wait, what is going on with Marshmallow's board right now? Okay. Marshmallow just needs that S+ on Justice. Because, okay, right, so going for the Vespula kill is also a good way to work up chain, because unlike most boss fights where it's just the boss and you end up with a chain of, like, 6, with Vespula, because of the wasps, you can end up with easily a chain of, like, 500 or 600. I'm trying to get confirmation here on whether Marshmallow is bingoed or not. Meanwhile, Les is still working on the Justice fight. Meanwhile, Les is looking good here on this Justice fight. And indeed, Les has successfully gotten the S+ on Justice. Oh, okay. What actually happened with Marshmallow was we lost the stream for a bit. That's what happened. Okay, well, meanwhile, let's see what Les is moving on to here. This is going for Shiitake, who is a really interesting character. Effectively has a railgun, so you can pierce through enemies. She is the best character for scoring in this game. So he might be... Where is he headed to right now? Because I see the S plus turbine with Shiitake, and I think he just forgot where turbine was. Yep, there you go. Turbine is, in fact, the second level of the entire game. So, S-plussing turbine with Shiitake is a bit of a challenge. The firepower drones will help. It's not as much of a challenge as if you were going for absolute top score with it. But you do need to be careful with Shiitake and Coral in particular because their weapons are kind of committal. In terms of they have a very long recharge time. You can basically fire once per second with Shiitake's main weapon. Her secondary is proximity mines. You actually just saw a couple go off there. They're good for area crowd control. Getting acceleration power-ups, which I should explain the power-ups, but getting the acceleration power-up is really nice for Shiitake and for Coral because it makes it more possible to set up your line of sight better to get more enemies at once. Oh, it looks like we got Marshmallow's stream back up, so Marshmallow is probably back onto the S plus Justice pursuit. So Marshmallow just needs that in order to bingo. And it would appear that Les has indeed S+'d. So I think that was first try, so good job with that. I don't know if there were any resets that I missed there. But in that case, Les now only needs to complete Capacitor with Lemon. And this isn't an S+ requirement, so I want to say Les has this in the bag. As long as Les can, yeah, find the level. There you go. And we saw Sam do this one earlier. So Lemon, a lot of players give Lemon a lot of crap because it's really easy to waste DPS with her because of how wide of a spread her weapon has. You almost, if you want to maximize the damage you're doing, you almost want to use it like a shotgun and like point blank things with it so that you're wasting as few bullets as possible. Her secondary is rockets that they're not homing, they just fire straight. But they do a pretty good chunk of damage with a good amount of splash as well. Meanwhile, you've probably seen Cactus's secondary, which is the flamethrower. It's actually... Cactus is really favorable for boss fights because of the flamethrower and how much damage it'll do. You do have to get a little bit close with it. It has very limited range. Let's see how Marshmallow's doing here. Had low energy for a second there, but after a while of not getting hit, your health recharges. Oh, he just lost the chain, though. That's unfortunate. That's the thing. That last phase, it's really easy to accidentally lose chain if you don't break the mines, the heads that become mines when he throws them on the floor. They don't add to your chain, but they keep it alive. Meanwhile, it looks like Les is indeed finished with Capacitor, so Les also has Bingo now. So now it's just down to Marshmallow managing to get a favorable third phase on Justice to keep that chain going. Ooh, that was... Wow, that was a nice dodge. So when you weapon... Oh, geez, and then he got hit by the laser. When you weapon swap in this game between your primary and secondary, you actually become invincible for a split second. You'll notice when if you look really closely, when the character kind of jumps up in the air to weapon switch, they'll also they'll glow white for like a very short time. Anytime that you're glowing white, you're invincible. So you'll notice that happen when you weapon switch. You'll notice it happen when you pick up a shutdown power-up, which is the blue power-up. It disables enemies for a few seconds. And also, when you get up from being knocked down, you'll be invincible for a couple of seconds.
Initiating containment protocol. Establishing defense perimeter.
But yeah, S-plussing isn't... You know, some people can make S-plussing look trivial, but it's really not. This game has a really interesting flow to it, and the developers actually talked at a conference about how they decided against implementing difficulty levels in the game. Of course, I say that, but now we're going to see Campaign Plus later. We'll get more to that later, but they decided against implementing difficulty levels and instead opted for this grading system where you see your rank at the end of the stage, because that provides its own challenge where people who want to get better at the game can challenge themselves to get a higher rank at the end of each stage. And so holding yourself to S+ is definitely challenging. Marshmallow saying he's going to give this one more attempt. It's definitely... there are certain levels in this game where, especially when you're pursuing an S+, it can get very... You can get very tilted. And it's definitely infuriating when you realize that you basically had it, but then you took too long on the third phase, or you didn't kill one of the head mines.
Establishing defense perimeter. Attempting capture. Compromised. Activating support units.
And there are quite a bit of moving parts to this Justice fight, so it's very easy to just accidentally lose sight of one of them, especially in the third phase. Is he going for the mine? He's going for the mine. Oh, but the laser got him. That's an example right there of where he was concentrating on killing the mine so that he wouldn't lose chain, but then the laser caught up to him. That swervy laser on the second part of that phase is definitely the most atrocious. So yeah, Marshmallow is going to call it there, it looks like. So we will begin setting up for the next matchup, which will be Walter, Lord Doctor PhD, and Dual Analogs. And meanwhile, we'll see if we want to get anybody in for interviews. All right, I am joined by Toucan Sam and Les, who are now in here with me. How did you feel this round went?
Pretty good. I was surprised that Les and Marshmallow did the things they did. They're kind of maniacs. Like I saw Les doing Turbine with Shiitake, and I thought he was insane.
I was shocked how fast I lost.
Yeah, I noticed when I realized what row Sam was going for, I was like, yeah, that row seems pretty safe. The only possible roadblock will be S plus Centrifuge, because it's easy to get overwhelmed in that.
Well, I had the advantage that Centrifuge is my favorite level, so it's the level I play the most. So
Yeah.
I knew that I could probably do that.
I mentioned that a lot of people have fun with that level and even play it with virtual player count ramped up.
Yeah, I saw the other S pluses. I was like, I don't know if I could do those. So I picked the line that had the fewest S plus levels in it.
Yes, slow and steady wins the race. Not even necessarily slow, but in this case, safe and steady.
S plus is not the only way I play, so...
Yeah, I try a lot to do S plus.
Yeah, it's not easy at all. That's why I avoided it, because I know it's not easy.
I'm sure you could see how quickly I reset the level whenever I failed on Justice. I'm used to
Let's see, we had about 7 squares with S plus there. I'm just kind of looking for a sneak preview of what's coming up. There's at least, I think, they're pretty evenly distributed across rounds, I guess. So there's a handful of them in each round coming up.
The ones coming up are going to be quite interesting. Once you get into that campaign plus content, it's like playing virtual player count 4 all the time.
Pretty much.
Yeah, it messes with you good.
But yeah, I'm in the camp of I never got the Assault Android Awesome achievement because I never had the patience to S plus Collider.
No, I think I got that accidentally once, so I didn't have to worry about trying to get it again.
I almost did that, but I lost it somewhere right at the beginning of the level, which is very easy to do. Like, the hardest parts of that level are the very beginning, and then obviously the main fight.
I actually somehow do slightly better on the Campaign Plus version of a Collider for the first half than I do on the vanilla version.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Like, I did it, and after like 10 attempts, I was like, man, I managed to get through that whole thing without taking it down or anything. And then Lick came in, just opened up a big, huge can of whoop my butt.
Yeah, I think, which one of you played as Licorice in this? Because one of you did a tile that involved playing as Licorice, right?
That would have been me.
Yes, S plus filament with Licorice. Because I remember actually discussing her weapons.
Yeah.
Character is no fun at all.
No, she's not.
Even when you play as Licorice, she hates you.
I feel like Marsh won for doing the line he actually tried to do, because I would never have tried to do that line.
Well, yeah, and they both Marshmallow and Les both had to do the S plus of justice because Les went down the middle and Marsh went across the fourth row.
Well, it was either do that or for me, or do the line where I had to S plus relay with Holly.
Yeah.
I can't do that on the Xbox, but I can on the Switch.
I almost did that line because I had starch in it, but
Yeah, starts for the scrubs.
yeah.
And
Actually, the first time I've ever S plus justice with Cactus, so
I tried, and I failed.
Meanwhile, it looks like the next round's layout is ready. I'm gonna get word on the card in a second.
I'm gonna see if I can watch these guys while we chit chat.
Well, I will be alone in here for the commentary of the next round, probably. But is there any
Understandable.
final thoughts that you guys have about your round?
Marsh and Les are maniacs. I can't believe they tried to do the lines they did.
I really
You did
don't
the
think
most
it was that
squares.
hard. Lemon was the hardest one for me. That was a lot of fun.
Definitely, justice was the hardest for me.
And anything you're looking forward to in the coming rounds?
I want to see them. I want to see everybody kick butt hard.
I really
Fair
want
enough.
to see Cactus fast. It's
Yeah.
really difficult to actually do anything decent.
Oh, what's this? Why do I have a whisper from VV Darth? Huh. Oh. Ooh, that is a nice layout.
All right, so it looks like we are indeed getting our next runners prepped for round 2. Again, thanks to Les, Marshmallow, and Toucan Sam for the first race and for jumping in here to share their thoughts. But we have the second bingo card ready. We have our runners with their respective colors set up. So that will be getting revealed momentarily. And we're going to see a couple of new interesting things on this card. I have a sneak preview. No one else is looking at it yet. We'll see whether anybody goes for those particular spaces. And we'll see some things of similar nature to the previous round, but with different stages, different character combinations, that sort of thing. All right, our 3 runners are readied up, so we will have the countdown momentarily. And runners should be off at any second now. Each player has revealed the card, which we should have up on screen momentarily. And we'll see what separate ways our runners decide to go here. Now, in this case, we've got... each runner has their own respective timer. All 3 of these runners are playing on PC. Last round, Marshmallow was actually playing on Xbox One. That's why they didn't have a timer overlay.
Yeah.
But here we go. Looks like Walter has made a beeline for Venom, which is a boss we haven't seen yet, with Cactus. So this is an S plus requirement. So if you thought S plussing Justice with Cactus looked difficult in the last round, I'm interested to see how this Venom fight goes. Meanwhile, Dual Analogs is on Descent, also with Cactus, which is also an S plus requirement on this board, as opposed to the previous one. And we've got Lord Dr. PhD going for Justice, not at all intimidated by what happened last round, but let's see what we've got here. This is, again, a S plus requirement for Justice. So we've got 3 S plus requirements going on, which means that these players cannot take a knockdown and need to not drop their chain. The Venom boss fight, since we haven't seen that yet, let me talk about that a bit. The Venom boss fight is very bullet hell-esque. And you'll see that we've got alternating between phases where there's a turret with a lot of bullets coming out from the side of the perimeter. Then we've got these turrets that come up from the ground in arrangements of 4 or 8. And then we have turrets, one big, as Moonspod would call it, Spindly Doodle, which is a turret, which is what we call the turret that comes up from when he pierces through the bottom of the level with a lot of bullets coming out in a spiral pattern. Looks like we're working on getting the streams restored here. Alright, looks like we might be good now. So, unfortunately we might have missed the culmination of the Venom fight, but it looks like both Walter and Dual Analogs were successful, and it looks like Dual Analogs will be going for the S plus on Venom now. So yeah, actually, Walter and Dual Analogs just basically high-fived. Because they're each doing the respective levels that the other just completed. Meanwhile, it would appear that Lord Dr. PhD already got the S plus on Justice, so well done there. Now, Lord Doctor ducking into the EX options screen for a second there. So might be going for one of these mega weapon squares. Let's see what he's going for. Oh, he might be going straight down the middle. Because he's got Lemon on, and he's heading for Turbine, yeah. So, he's going to go... Lord Doctor is probably going to be looking to complete Medulla with Peanut, complete Vespula with Peanut, and complete Embryo Plus with Licorice using Mega Weapons after this. That one's going to be interesting. Meanwhile, it looks like Walter also already done with the Descent S+. And moving on to, this looks like Heat, yes. So it looks like both Walter and Dual Analogs may have settled on the 4th row. I should give Walter a shout out. Walter is one of the... he's been involved in Assault Entry Cactus speedrunning for several years. I think he may have been on a hiatus for a while, but he and Lovebot were a couple of the first runners of this game.
Firepower extended.
So Walter definitely no stranger to going fast in this.
Weapon max. Accelerate.
Meanwhile, let's see what Dual Analogs is doing now. Dual Analogs moving on to Vespula with Peanut. Okay, which is the center square there.
I'm on fire.
I'm not sure whether he actually got the S+ on Venom. It looks like he didn't mark it.
Shut down.
So I'm not sure if we'll see him go back to that later.
Battery here. Accelerate extended.
Meanwhile, Lord Doctor finishing off Turban with Lemon. Also, to explain Mega Weapons, you may have already noticed, but what Mega Weapons does is it replaces the secondary weapon with basically a beefed-up version of the primary weapon. Which kind of makes it funny to look at, in many cases. Especially with Starch, because the is just the oversized laser, kind of like the last phase of Justice.
Battery here. I'm right.
So, also, I think that Heat Plus is the first instance that we've seen of a Campaign Plus level so far. So, I mentioned, I made a passing reference to this earlier, talking about how the developers decided not to implement difficulty levels in this game, but after enough, after the speedrunning community had grown for this, we had quite a few people like clamoring for like super tough versions of the levels or something, and the developers actually implemented that first on Switch, and eventually it came to PC. I'm not sure whether it's coming to other platforms eventually. So we just saw the more difficult version of Heat. It's got a much tougher arrangement of enemies, and also the flame jets, instead of being red, they are blue. Which brings up a good thing to talk about, which is the different colors of damage in this game. So you'll notice that there are red, blue, and yellow bullets effectively in this game. Yellow is the color of the bullets that players fire, which only hurts enemies. Blue bullets are what a lot of the enemies fire, which only hurts the player. Red bullets or lasers or fire hurts both players and enemies, so you can actually use it to your advantage. So with Heat Plus changing the jets from red to blue, it means that the environment is not going to do you any favors anymore. So meanwhile, we've got Walter now working on the Vespula fight. I think he was just about to... restart, I think, but then he realized he doesn't need an S+ for this square. He just needs to complete the fight. So he wisely decided to just keep going. Meanwhile, Lord Doctor working on that center square, complete Medulla with Peanut. Medulla is the final boss of the game, and you may think that some of this boss fight looks familiar, and that is because it actually involves refights of the final phase of each of the first 3 bosses in the game. So that's Embryo, Vespula, and Justice, and he just finished the Justice refight portion. Meanwhile, Dual Analogs is playing Heat, not Heat Plus. I'm not sure if he realizes his error. I may want to point that out. Unless there's another tile that I'm missing. Oh, no, wait, is he doing complete... What is he going for here? There is another complete Heat with Cactus tile, but he's... Let me take a quick look here. I think... Meanwhile, Lord Dr. PhD is indeed... in the last phase, the Geometry Wars phase of the Medulla fight. This is where the game tricks you into thinking that you finished the fight, but no, you actually haven't. Okay, Duel is in fact doing Heat Plus now.
Accelerate.
Meanwhile, we've got Walter on, it looks like Checkpoint Plus, which is the left tile in the row that they're working on.
Battery here. Weapon maximum firepower. Shut down. Battery over here. Firepower.
Did we just lose the streams again? Yeah, looks like we're working on that again. So Walter is effectively on his last tile. And I just realized that Duel did effectively... I'm learning how to read the event ticker in Bingo Sync, and he did realize that he was not playing Heat on the correct difficulty level, so he did actually go and clear that. And now he's about to finish Heat Plus, so that's cool. And meanwhile, looks like we've got the Neapolitan checked off square there on row 4, column 3, with all 3 players completing Vespilla with Peanut.
Accelerate. Extended. Battery up. Firepower extended. Shut down. Battery here.
But yeah, that's an unfortunate setback for Dual Analogs, because he would have been... It would have been interesting to see how neck and neck he would have been with
Extended.
Walter if it weren't for choosing the wrong campaign, effectively. Also, Checkpoint Plus with Licorice and VPC2, that is quite the challenge, because, again, the Plus campaign is designed to be tough as nails to begin with, so doing that with Virtual Player Count too, that's going to be a rough ride. This is not something I have investigated at all. I have played through Campaign Plus. It was hard enough without Virtual Player Count on.
Weapon max. Firepower. Battery over here. Accelerate. Extended. Shut down. Firepower. Battery up. Shut down.
Meanwhile, Lord Doctor is moving on to his final square, complete Embryo Plus with Licorice using Mega Weapons.
Shut down. Battery up. It's inevitable.
In fact, Lord Doctor has already cleared that square off, so might actually already be done. And then Walter finishing right behind. So Dual Analogs will be coming up the rear here. We're seeing just the end of Walter's run right now.
Accelerate. Firepower.
I was looking at the actual bingo board, so I was not subject to delay there while we were recovering the streams. But yeah, as Sam is saying, to reiterate what I said earlier about virtual player count, this game supports local co-op, but what virtual player count does is it intensifies enemies the same way that local co-op would, but it does it while you're still playing single player. And the game supports up to 4 players in local co-op. I didn't mention that part before. Also, I'm being told that we should have the stream snags solved once and for all. And we do have one more round of bingo after this, and then a Campaign Plus race between, I believe we have it planned to be the top 2 finishers in round 2 and round 3. Well, the interesting thing about virtual player count 2 is that I believe players have done testing on this, and virtual player count 4 is not always possible to beat. Particularly on bosses, I believe. Yeah, I believe I actually asked Moonspot this. Moonspot has been assisting in organizing this and will be one of the racers in the next round, and he said that all of the challenges in these tiles have been tested. So, like, we know that they're possible. So they didn't put anything in there that wasn't possible. But if you were to say, like, beat X boss on VPC4, that might not actually be possible. And it looks like Dual Analogs is also done. So we've got all 3 players finishing. GG. Again, Dual Analogs and Walter would have been very close if it were not for Dual Analogs picking Campaign instead of Campaign Plus earlier on Heat. So Dual Analogs effectively kind of did 6 squares. So GG's to our runners. I'm going to see if we have anyone interested in interviewing after this round. Yeah, this game is on Steam, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch. The Plus version specifically is currently on Switch and Steam. But Plus really just refers to Campaign Plus and maybe some of the unlockable costumes. Otherwise, you get the full campaign on all platforms, and I believe all platforms have a demo available. Let me just tell these guys, get these guys in here for interviewing if they want it. We'll be joined by the others shortly. Here's Lord Doctor.
Everyone.
And here's Walter.
Yeah, hello there.
What's going on?
So yeah, how you think that went?
I had a problem. I had a problem finding the map because I actually just forgot what the map was called. It was really bad. I was looking around.
I think someone had that problem in the first round too. I think they were looking for capacitor and they were going like everywhere except zone 1.
I also made a huge mistake of not realizing it was Heat Plus, so I did Heat, and then ticked it, and then I was like, "Oh, it's Heat Plus." I'm gonna do the level again. Yeah.
And I didn't know. I tried to warn you in the chat in the card, but I didn't realize that it actually said you had already cleared the spot, so you had realized it by then.
Yeah, I realized straight away. I was like, "Ah, that was a big mistake. That's gonna cost me."
Yeah, because you and Walter both picked the same row, as you can probably tell from the card. And I am definitely very curious how close it would have been.
I thought it was neck and neck. I think I went a little bit slower without realizing I should have just stayed with Cactus and gone with Cactus a bunch of times. But that's my bad. Congratulations, Walter. You smashed me.
Hey.
But in fact, I think Lord Doctor actually finished first by a small margin.
He did.
He beat Walter as well.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Lord Doctor.
But I pushed my timer because I only turned it on after Justice Plus, I think.
Oh.
But I don't think that timers matter. I hope.
No, as long as we could see easily who finished first from looking at the card. So that's really all that was needed from my end.
I thought Lord Doctor was the top guy because I saw the second screen finish and be stationary, and then I thought, oh no, I've lost, and then I lost to Walter as well. Congratulations, you two smashed me. I'm just a scrub.
No, you're not. Come on.
No, you're all
I
really
fell
fast.
over. I fell over many times on checkpoint as licorice.
Yeah,
I
I
have
got
not
the
trained this
impression-
character.
I got the impression you were just like trying to just kind of push through to the end.
Yeah, I also am not. I don't really play that much. If I fail, I usually just restart. So it feels really weird, and it's also just obviously you shouldn't restart. So
I feel like
Really
I
weird
saw
feeling.
you prevent yourself from doing that on Vestibula. Like you paused for a second, and then you realized it doesn't
my
require
pause
S plus.
was yes, exactly. Yeah.
I usually have auto restart on, so it was pretty weird when I got down that the level just didn't restart.
Yeah. Very, very weird.
That bingo was a lot of fun to actually play. I'd play that again happily. It's very well done.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah,
fun.
it's great.
Great time.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I've definitely never seen anyone try this with this game, so it was really cool to see how close that turned out.
And it works really well because the game in itself is sort of a very friendly multiplayer game. So it's kind of fun to play it like this in this mode.
Yeah.
Indeed.
No.
Oh well, thanks very much for hosting and all that stuff as well, Sini.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Yeah, any last thoughts or anything you're looking forward to seeing, assuming that you're spectating next round?
It should just be fun watching people play the campaign plus.
Yeah, I'll
Very
just
hard,
see
man.
people play. Oh yeah, that's me. I'll see how that goes.
Do
Yeah,
only
so
winners go
Walter-
into the next round? I thought everyone who wanted to went. I don't know.
Lord Doctor and Walter will be going to the next round. We'll be taking the top two from this round and round 3 of the bingo.
Ah, okay.
And yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
I have
definitely
nothing
interested
more
to
to
see.
add.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested to see how the Campaign Plus will go. I know Bond has had a few trial runs through Campaign Plus in a speedrunning setting before. I'm not sure how much other people have worked on it yet.
Oh, not at all. I just went S plus for the levels, but never tried to speedrun the whole campaign.
That's still pretty good practice.
Speedrunning I haven't done in a long time, but I feel like it will work out. We can figure it out. It's just kill the enemies fast, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Well, cool. Thanks everybody for hopping in for interviews.
Yeah.
Thanks for hosting, man.
Yep.
Catch you later.
All right. And with that, I will let the crew know that we're ready for what's next. And we will hopefully get this started shortly. It looks like our players are already readying up for round 3. Alright, we are getting the countdown, so we should be off momentarily. And this card is gonna be a doozy. So, we saved the most outlandish challenges for our last race with some of our most hardened veterans. Not to sell short anybody else who's been in this thing, because it's been fantastic watching all of these rounds. But this card's going to have some real interesting ones. I don't know whether we'll see them actually attempted. But let's see what people opt for. Figuring out what CJ's actually doing here. Alright, so CJ's going for Convection with Lemon. Wait, Convection with Lemon? Why is he playing Convection? Wait, Convection. There's no... I don't know why he's playing Convection with Lemon. Anyway, Moonspot is playing Convection with Holly, which is actually a space on the board. Meanwhile, we've got Mr. Bond on Capacitor with Aubergine. Aubergine is Mr. Bond's favorite character, hands down, I believe. And that is... Oh, wow. This is an S Plus requirement for Capacitor Plus. So this will be really interesting to watch. Meanwhile, the Convection requirement is not Convection Plus and it's not an S Plus, but it is Virtual Player Count 3, so there's going to be a ton of enemies. I'm really interested to see what Mr. Bond is going for here, because he already is well on his way to S Plusing this first one. I hope he's not going down the middle, because going down the middle has some pretty sizable things in it. Although it also, interestingly enough, has complete boss rush with Aubergine, and then complete boss rush with Aubergine using first-person camera right next to each other. So that may actually be his play, is to just do it once and get both spaces at the same time. So let's see where Mr. Bond heads to next. Because Boss Rush is a sizable challenge because it easily takes over 6 minutes. But he is picking Holly. No, what is he doing? He is changing some things up. Oh, he might be going for the top row, which requires Holly with Mega Weapons for Repeater. So meanwhile, we still have CJ and Moons both going through Convection here. I'm a little worried about CJ because unless I'm missing something, I believe he's using the wrong character for this space. Meanwhile, Mr. Bond has instead gone to Justice with Coral. But yeah, I think CJ seriously just used the wrong character and didn't realize it. So what is... okay. So Mr. Bond is going for, yes, the top row, because Justice with Coral. Using Mega Weapons, which is real interesting, because that means you don't have her Plasma Field available. Coral's Plasma Field secondary is a really useful defensive sub-weapon, because it pushes things out of your immediate vicinity. But yeah, so let's see what these players go for next. Looks like CJ is indeed going for the bottom row. Oh, the complete Vestibula is actually Vestibula Plus, so you'll notice that Vestibula is dark now. So each of the Plus bosses has more intense patterns. Vestibula's flowers come out in a much denser pattern, as in they come out more frequently, there's less space between them, so you can't really dodge between them without actually weapon swap dodging. Meanwhile, Moon is on Collider with Coral, or not Collider, Centrifuge with Coral. But this is an S plus requirement, so we may see a lot of resets there. And Bond is on the Repeater with Holly using Mega Weapons requirement. Which is regular Repeater, which is a relief, because Repeater Plus is a really bad time. Repeater Plus is the one level, as far as I've been told, Repeater Plus is the one level in the Plus campaign that was designed by Sickle, who also thought that a level which was just incessant bombs dropping on people was a good idea. And I think people during early access said, no, that's not a good idea, please stop. Alright, so CJ is done with Vestibula Plus. And CJ is moving on to Control with Lemon. Control is a real interesting one to play because it has these turrets that help you out. In the regular version of Control, the bottom turret is an auto-fire turret that you just step on it once and it keeps firing until it uses all of its ammunition, which is indicated by the radial sort of progress meter thing around the turret. On the top left, there is a turret that is like Coral's plasma field, but bigger, and usually players tend to use that one the least, because you have to be standing on it for it to activate, and that pretty much requires enemies getting close to you, which you don't want. You don't want except on your own terms, I should say. And then the top right turret is a missile turret that, again, also only fires when you're stepping on it, but it does some decent damage, and it homes in on things. So now I see Mr. Bond on, it looks like Repeater Plus, I think, with Peanut. Actually, maybe it's regular Repeater again, judging by the card. Yeah, it's regular Repeater. I got thrown off by the some of the terrain that was auto-generated because the regular and Plus versions of Repeater actually generate terrain a little bit differently.
Okay.
Meanwhile, Moon is now on to Vestibula with Shiitake, it looks like. Yep. So this is the one that we saw CJ doing a bit earlier. The Vestibula Plus with Shiitake. Which I would argue is quite the challenge, unless you're really adept at switching to her secondary, which I am not. Because the secondary is really going to help with the Wasps, but you're also going to have to weapon switch really carefully so that you can avoid taking too much damage from them. Because a single Wasp will only do a single pip of damage to you, but the way that they really densely swarm in this fight is very easy to immediately take a full knockdown. Moon adeptly swerving to get that battery. I think Moon actually had an S plus going up through the very end of Phase 4. S plus is not a requirement for this. Meanwhile, now CJ doing Centrifuge with Coral, which we already saw Moon do. So clearly we have both Moon and CJ going for the bottom row, Bond going for the top. And Bond has a very interesting looking screen right now because the final square that he needs to do is Control Plus with Coral using first person camera. This seems like a really challenging thing to do because on Control specifically, you really want to have, like, having a good vantage point of the entire area is really useful because of the turrets that you want to keep in mind that you can use on the playing field. So he has to kind of just remember those when they're not in his line of sight. And also, we've seen some Banshee Spectres as well as a bunch of other stuff, and it's way harder to see all of that stuff coming at you in first-person mode. First-person mode is a fun little, I mean, more or less Easter egg, just an extra mode that was thrown in because it was easy for the devs to program in. So it's an EX mode option that you can unlock. It is definitely not the most advisable way of playing the game, but it's definitely interesting and funny for a minute or two. But it's basically affixing a camera to the character's head because it even spins with the character when you get knocked down. But especially playing as Coral with this, you have to keep in mind Coral's limited range due to the shotgun weapon. And it can also be a little bit hard to gauge while you're inside the plasma field. It's hard to gauge like exactly where it ends. But it's definitely really interesting to see like what things look like from the ground level. Meanwhile, Moon is now onto Filament Plus with Lemon. While CJ is on Centrifuge with Coral, which is an S plus requirement. And he's about to wrap that up. So, meanwhile, Mr. Bond is actually done, so he got bingo. I was honestly really interested to see whether he was going to try doing first-person camera boss rush with Aubergine, but it probably just didn't seem worth the time investment, because that would easily take probably 7 minutes. And that's if you didn't fail it at all. So yeah, GG to Mr. Bond. And meanwhile, Moonspot, I believe, is now moving into his last square. If it weren't for CJ's error in picking character, because the bottom left square should not be marked for him, we got confirmation on that from another player, or another non-player spectator who played in a previous round. If it weren't for that, CJ would probably have the lead here, but he's going to have to replay that tile. Also, shout out to Moonspot for having the interesting font on the timer. I suppose I didn't really talk about the level filament, which we're seeing on the top right, so I can take a little time to talk about that. This is the plus version of the level, so we're seeing all sorts of enemies that you would never see at this point in the game on the regular campaign. And that is one thing that I should point out for people who are like contemplating, you know, looking into this game. If you think it looks too chaotic, keep in mind, when players are playing on Campaign Plus, those levels are designed to be hard. Like, this rave party that just started here with the turrets going opposite directions with different colored lasers. That doesn't happen in the regular version of this level, because this is the third stage in the game. The regular campaign has a reasonable difficulty curve. It has spikes every so often that are like designed to be there for bosses and stuff, and for going between zones. However, Campaign Plus does not care about difficulty curve. It is just all difficulty all the time. All right, CJ just saw the message. Let's see if he decides to go and play through Convection again. Since I saw him go into the EX options, yeah, it looks like he's going to do that. So, because of that error in judgment, we've got Moons taking up second place. So, congratulations to Moons Pod. It's hard to tell whether CJ would have actually finished second or third if he had done this level with Holly to begin with, because you have to take into account that Holly and Lemon have different types of attacks, so that could have some bearing on how much time it takes to complete the level with one versus the other. Meanwhile, it looks like we've already got Moonspod in here joining me, and Mr. Bond in the wings as well.
Hey, Kenny.
Hello, friend.
Hey.
I'm
Hey,
illiterate.
CJ. CJ, how are you in here already? I still see you playing.
I am not playing anymore. I think we just call it there. I am just incapable of reading the word Holly.
Who did you play?
He played as
I played
Lemon.
Lemon instead.
He picked Lemon.
Yeah.
You picked Lemon.
For backstory.
In my defense, it's 7 a.m. and I haven't slept, so.
Oh, jeez. For context, for people in the Twitch chat who don't understand the meme here, we have in the Assault Android Cactus Discord. P.S. We have one of those. There is one of the memes that we have set up on a bot command is an image of the I'm blanking on it now. The Dark Souls text, but instead of saying you died, it says you picked Lemon. And now we all get to spam that at CJ, and he's never going to live it down.
It's already started.
I'll happily pick Lemon. Lemon's great.
Yeah, wasn't it Smash who picked Lemon for the relay race that we did?
Yeah.
Or whatever? Shout outs to Smish, one of the actual developers of the game, who picked Lemon for the relay race that we did a while ago. So yeah, what did you guys think of the race?
It was fun.
Yeah, it was good.
It was good, like, kind of strategizing which to pick.
Nobody was going to pick the middle square, let's be honest.
I vetoed anything with aubergine in it, and tried to knock as many disc bosses as possible.
Man, as soon as I saw aubergine on there, I was on it.
Yeah,
I was wondering, Bond, if you were going to go for the center column, because the thing is, there's 2 tiles that require completing boss rush with aubergine. So, like, normally that would be an instant.
Oh yeah.
That's true. The first-person camera turned me off of that immediately, though.
Yeah, that would have been really awful.
It's rough with her because you need to be able to tell where Hilo is, and it's difficult to do in first person.
Yeah, first person in a normal level is hard enough. First person in boss rush is just a complete non-starter.
Right. And actually, you did do a first-person level, because you did the top row, which had Control Plus with Coral, which also seemed challenging enough.
Yeah, and surprisingly, I only took 1 down, so I'm gonna count that as a win.
Yeah, I think I started watching your screen right when that down happened, because I was like, oh look, the camera's spinning. Yep, he's in first-person mode now. But yeah, well done on that, because I figured between the fact that you kind of have to, like, it's one thing when you've got the, sort of top-down camera to keep track of, how recharged that one turret is and stuff. So between needing to keep track of the turrets, needing to keep track of enemies, obviously, which you've even got, like, this was Control Plus, right? So yeah, so you've got, like, Banshee Spectres and crap in there, too. And then you've also got Coral's secondary plasma field, which I feel like it's not always easy to tell where that ends when you're standing inside it in first-person mode.
Oh no, it sure isn't. You just kind of pop it down and hope for the best.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's hard enough just to find the machine gun turret in first person, especially with Control Plus, where they change the dang position of it on you.
Yeah, I guess they change where you spawn, I suppose, because they rotate.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah. Any other comments from people? Because it looks like we do have the layout set up for the upcoming Campaign Plus race.
I mean, I'll just throw it out there. This is the first time I've ever used mega weapons, so...
Really?
Is it really?
Yeah, I never ever turned them on before.
Wow.
Why is any reason, or just didn't feel like it?
No, I just never. It was always a couple menus deep into something. So I was like, whatever.
Right. Okay.
All right.
Yeah. It was fun.
Okay. Yeah.
So I guess Moons and Mr. Bond, you are moving on to the Campaign Plus race. How do you feel about that?
Hang on. I'm also doing the Campaign Plus race, aren't I?
It's 2 from the second round and 2 from the third round. So we've got Lord Doctor and Walter from round 2, and we've got Mr. Bond and Moons from round 3.
Oh, okay. Is that how it works? Okay, that's.
So, out of curiosity, did CJ finish before me? But he used them.
But like cheating, yeah.
Yeah.
I like technically filled out all my squares, but also cheating.
So it's really unclear because I don't know how much it would have differed, like in terms of the time it took to complete that one level with Lemon versus Holly.
Holly would have been faster.
Yeah,
for sure.
I'm just not very good at Holly.
Nah.
Right. Well, we did have
my mistake.
We had 2 square misreads in the races today. So
yeah.
Yeah, okay. So are we setting up for the next one?
Yeah, so you and Mr. Bond can go join the setup station again.
Right.
And
okay.
GG
See you. Can you?
Yep.
Bye.
And meanwhile, we will cut to a break before launching into Campaign Plus, because Campaign Plus will be a wild ride that will run about an hour, I would estimate. Possibly a little bit longer for all the runners to finish. So stay tuned for that, but we will be back in a few. All right, we are getting set to start up this Campaign Plus race. Welcome back, everybody. I am Kenny. I will be your commentator again for the remainder of this broadcast, which will be this Campaign Plus race between Walter, Moonspod, Lord Dr. PhD, and Mr. Bond. So on the top, we've got Lord Dr. PhD, who won the second round of bingo, Mr. Bond, who won the third round, and Walter was the runner-up to Lord Doctor, and Moons was the runner-up to Mr. Bond. But this will be really interesting because I suspect that for some of these players, it will be their first full Campaign Plus run. Mr. Bond has done a few of these in the past, so it'll be interesting to see how this goes. Others of these runners are none of these runners are slouches because a lot of them have done work on S+ing levels in Campaign Plus, which is also really good practice. So we will see what happens because anything could happen. It's very easy for things to get hairy in these levels. And we are getting the runners counted off right now, so we will be starting off momentarily. All right, so now as opposed to the bingo before, we will be seeing all players going through all of the levels in the order that they are presented in the campaign because that's the quickest way to do things. because as each level completes, you get the option to just immediately proceed to the next level. You don't have to go back to the map at all. All the players will be using... Oh no, we do have characters using... players using different characters. So we see Moonspot using Starch, but it looks like we have everybody else using Cactus. So the first level Descent is the introduction to the game. However, I mentioned this earlier, on Campaign Plus difficulty, there isn't really difficulty curves per se. I mean, there may be a bit, but there's pretty much just super hard difficulty throughout the entire campaign. It gets increasingly oppressive to an extent, but you're already seeing a whole ton of different enemy types that you would normally never see in this first level of the game. So again, don't be intimidated. If this looks hard, it is hard by design, because players literally asked for this. Believe it or not. Let's explain some of what we're seeing here. I will repeat what I mentioned before about batteries, just in case we've got anybody new to the stream. The battery meter at the top center of each player's screen is effectively a timer. So if you get knocked down by enemies, like each player has health at the top left, getting knocked down doesn't cost you anything besides time. Time is really the main factor. One, because this is a speed run, but two, no, seriously, time is the main factor. Because if that battery runs out, that is the only way you will actually fail a level and have to restart it. And as long as they don't waste too much time getting knocked down or just not clearing enemies fast enough, they will continuously get battery drops as they kill enemies, and that will refill part of the timer, part of the battery meter. You'll also see players pick up power-ups. So we've got 3 different types of power-ups, red, yellow, and blue. Red is a firepower power-up, which gives them these drones that you see alongside them, which just adds to their DPS. Yellow is the accelerate power-up, which gives them wings, like we saw on Mr. Bond's screen as he finished that level. That makes you run faster, and it also makes you able to dodge more attacks. And the blue power-up was Shutdown, which makes all the enemies stop moving for a bit of time. It also refills your health and makes you invincible for a couple of seconds. Your health will also refill if you just don't take damage for a couple of seconds, and there's actually an audio cue when it refills. There are a lot of helpful audio cues in this game. Shoutouts to Jeff Van Dyke, who did the audio for this game. Audio and composed the soundtrack, because it's just... There are so many good examples of good audio engineering in this in terms of useful sound cues, and also the soundtrack is just amazing. It's on Bandcamp, it's on YouTube, you should all check it out. So now we've got all the players into the second level Turbine, which has this... We see the first example of holes in the level in this particular level. Holes are not... You can't fall into holes. This isn't like Helldivers where you can just like, oopsie, I fell in a hole and I'm dead now. Nothing like that. It just restricts your movement. You can still fire over holes, as opposed to walls, which we'll see later on, where you can't fire through them, but some characters can actually fire some of their secondary weapons over them. So I guess I'll try to explain some of these enemies that we see. So we've got these things that look like toasters. People like to colloquially call them toaster dogs. They're actually called Fidos. There's 3 types. There's little white ones which shoot a single missile into the air and try to hit you with it. These missiles manifest as targeting reticles on the ground, so basically just don't be standing there. Otherwise you're going to get hit and instantly get a knockdown. There are blue ones, which we're not seeing right now, but they're fetch Fidos, and they you definitely want to prioritize killing them because they restrict your movement. And then the large red ones are Jumbo Fidos, which shoot a whole bunch of micro missiles. It looks like at this point we've got Mr. Bond, Moonspot, and Walter all pretty much neck and neck. They all spawned into the third map Filament almost simultaneously. So this is real exciting. Meanwhile, Lord Doctor just about finishing up the second level. So Filament's gimmick is that every so often between enemy waves, the lights go off, which is a really neat looking effect because you see that like all the enemies have these glowing lights on them that also indicate their health actually. So they start turning more and more red as they're closer to death. In this level, we're seeing all kinds of turrets drop down and spawn on these remote platforms, and we're seeing these various types of titans drop down. The white titans are bomber titans that shoot mines out of their arm cannons. The red titans are blaster titans, which pound the ground and send shockwaves out. Also, we're seeing the blue toaster dogs, the fetch Fidos, now in this level as well. And then there is also a black titan called the Buster Titan, which you'll probably know it when you see it. They like to lunge around and just stomp you. You can avoid being stomped with a very well-timed weapon swap dodge. Weapon swap dodging is very important to understand in this game, and it's only very briefly alluded to in the tutorial, so a lot of players don't immediately realize the importance of it. We are seeing the Buster Titans right now on the players that are that got to Filament first. So you saw them doing these big like jumps into the air and thwomps, sort of stomping the ground. That's Buster Titans for you. There are also 3 types of turrets in the game. There are bullet turrets, which just shoot clusters of bullets. And then there are these 2 types of laser turrets. The red ones are laser turrets. The blue ones are maser turrets. I explained damage earlier, but I will reiterate again that red damage hurts both you and enemies, whereas blue bullets and lasers and so on only hurt you. So you can actually use red lasers and flames and stuff to your advantage. And mines. Mines also explode in red. So Mr. Bond and Moonspod, again neck and neck, going into the 4th stage capacitor, and here we actually see walls. So you'll notice that, for instance, Starch's laser and Cactus's machine gun cannot shoot through the wall. But you'll notice that Starch's micro missiles can actually get around and over walls sometimes. Meanwhile, so we do have 3 of our 4 runners into capacitor, and Lord Doctor just switching over now. So, I don't know, what is that, probably a minute or less between 1st and 4th right now? And there's plenty of time to go in this campaign. The first couple of zones in the game, so each zone is 5 levels, and there are 5 zones. And each zone in the game, they get progressively longer and more time-consuming as we go in. So you could definitely see this spread out more, or you could see people make up some time later on, depending on how they fare. So we're seeing the mine phase of capacitor right now, which also exists on the normal version of the campaign, but on Campaign Plus it kind of lasts a bit longer, plus there's other types of enemies going on at the same time. And now we've got laser and maser turrets alternatingly spawning in the center, whereas on the original campaign it's just bullet turrets. We've also got Reaper Spectres here. We saw a Banshee Spectre briefly in the previous phase. Banshee Spectres fire out an arc of blue bullets, and Reaper Spectres fire out a single red laser. But these are our top 3 players here are at the tail end of capacitor and will be heading into the first boss. Mr. Bond and Moonspod still pretty much neck and neck. Mr. Bond gained a couple of seconds. And this actually speaks to Mr. Bond's strength at speedrunning this too, because I mean, Cactus is a pretty strong character, but Starch's laser at close range can really carve things up. And micro missiles do an appreciable amount of damage too. But Cactus's flamethrower is really going to excel on these boss fights especially. Also, I should put in a word about Embryo here. So Embryo's attacks here are in very dense formations, and some of them, we just saw Mr. Bond take it down, for example. Some of these are really difficult to deal with. What's interesting is even before Campaign Plus existed, there was an alternate version of Embryo known as Dark Embryo. He would appear sometimes in daily drives, which are randomized daily challenges that are like, I think, 10 layers apiece. And he would also appear in Infinity Drive, which is a very long challenge, takes easily an hour in itself to complete, or close to it. He would appear in that if you were doing particularly well by about 60% through it. This Embryo Plus fight is, in fact, Dark Embryo. and they actually tweaked one of his phases a little bit. The phase that Mr. Bond is on right now, these bullets that fire out radially kind of fast, they used to fire out even faster than that, and it was basically impossible to react to them. So they actually tuned that a bit when they added Dark Embryo as Embryo Plus in the Campaign Plus version. So Mr. Bond is in fact through Embryo, or Embryo Plus first. Let's see who we have coming up second. Moons is still holding second place for now. Walter third, and Lord Doctor has 2 phases remaining, so he's 2/3 through the fight, essentially. Meanwhile, Mr. Bond and Moonspod and now Walter are spawning into Hive, which is the first map of Zone 2. So you'll notice we immediately have a completely different color theme. We have different music. We have a lot of wasps. This is actually the first level that introduced wasps in the regular campaign. But we're going to see, again, just a mishmash of different types of enemies with no real clear difficulty ramp. It's just everything thrown in our face from square one in Campaign Plus. So, for instance, we're seeing Blaster Titans, which normally would not appear until a couple of levels after this. We were seeing factories, which I haven't explained yet. There's a few different types of those as well that I'll try to call out as they come up again. We've got mine canisters. Those are great. It's like a piñata, except it explodes. And it's bad for your health. Well, I guess eating too much candy is also bad for your health, but this has more immediate repercussions. Mine canisters, I like to have a shutdown power-up handy for those, because you can just tank it because you become invincible for a couple of seconds. No pun intended, even though they are mine tanks. But yeah, I don't think this level had mines at all in the original campaign. So that's also a marked difference. Also, one thing that is worth mentioning is that some of these levels are rotated from the orientation that you see them in the regular campaign. In fact, Mr. Bond made a reference to that when we were talking during the interview after the last bingo round. He mentioned how he had to find the machine gun turret in Control because you spawn in at a different place in Control on Campaign Plus versus regular campaign. And it is, in fact, rotated differently if you're using the normal top-down view. He was using first-person view in that challenge, so it's a little less relevant there. So we've got Mr. Bond into Influx, which is, I think I mentioned this earlier in one of the bingo races, but this is the first level that really demonstrates how dynamic the level design gets in this game, where between different waves of enemies, you will see the level just reform itself. And the ways that it reforms itself are actually different in Campaign Plus than in Campaign. So, like, Campaign doesn't have this formation that you see right now on Mr. Bond's screen, well, you did see right now until it changed again. This particular formation, where you're just in the middle on an island surrounded by wasps in the void, is actually kind of interesting because it's almost exactly the opposite of one of the arrangements in the normal version of Influx, where in that version there is a hole in the middle that the wasps come out of, but you have ground all around it. This one... So I thought that was an interesting touch, possibly intentional by the developers. They definitely made a lot of interesting little subtle additions, like the rotating, and just like some of the things they did with enemy placements that I'll try to call out as we get to them in Campaign Plus to make it harder in really clever ways. And of course, way more laser turrets. In this part of the game, in the regular campaign, you would not be seeing laser turrets at all yet. I think the first laser turret comes up in the beginning of in the first level of Zone 3 in the regular campaign. Now we get into Bond's into the most alarming part of this level, in my opinion, because you've got mine canisters and you've also got this like ridiculously close quarters grid layout going on. So you've got to be really careful to not get whacked by mines. But he's doing a pretty good job taking them from around corners if he can. Whoa, that one was Alright, he's just dashing through him, why not? He's got Accelerate, I believe, so that's probably helping. And actually, that's the last wave of this map. So Bond is done with this. Moonspot is also in this last iteration of the map right now. And we'll be moving on pretty soon after Mr. Bond. Mr. Bond is into Oxygen, which is this donut-shaped arena. Even in the original version of this map, it has a mine phase that is my least favorite part of the map by far. And the good news is we won't have a mine phase. At least not the way that it was in the original campaign. You'll see. The first couple of waves of Oxygen are actually pretty close to how they are in the original. But yeah, okay, so I said no mine phase, but instead we have super mines in this phase right now. Super mines are just bigger versions of mines. I think in the original campaign they only show up in one level, which is, again, the first level of Zone 3 checkpoint. But we're going to see them a few times in this. Also, one funny thing to point out, I explained maser turrets before, which are the blue laser turrets. There is only one maser turret in the entirety of the regular campaign, and it is in the second to last level. We saw more maser turrets in the first, like, I want to say 2 or 3 levels of Campaign Plus than you would see in the entire regular campaign. So, just to give you an idea of how much they turn up the volume on this. Meanwhile, it looks like Lord Doctor is definitely falling a bit further behind here, just finishing up Influx now, and going to be working his way into Oxygen. But getting closer to, you know, probably more than half a level behind. Yeah, Mr. Bond is actually just about finishing up. So between Mr. Bond's efficiency and Lord Doctor getting touched up a bit in Influx, we're seeing the distance increase between our first and last runners, but all still respectable paces. I would definitely say I would be doing worse than any of these players right now. Especially given that some of them are doing this, you know, for the first time in this sort of setting where they're speed running back-to-back the entire Campaign Plus. I think most of these players haven't done that yet. Mr. Bond has. Meanwhile, Moon is just about polishing off the end of Oxygen now, and Mr. Bond is into Process, which is a map where we see conveyor belts. This is another map where rotation becomes an interesting way to change up the level. In Campaign, this is effectively rotated 90 degrees from the regular campaign. So in Campaign, you've got the 3 conveyors going left to right, or right to left. Whereas in Campaign Plus, you've got the 3 going top down. But it is otherwise the same shape, they just changed where the camera is centered. But it definitely, when I first played Campaign Plus, I think the first level where the angle made a real difference was Filament, and I honestly got fooled into thinking that they changed the level. But it was actually just rotated. So it's pretty cool how, like, you know, if you think about it like that, they managed to make the level feel significant just by changing the angle that you're changing the perspective that you're looking at it at. I think I just saw Bond break chain right now for the first time, so he had an S+ going through like half of this level. And we've got more mine tanks going on. We've got, I saw in a, I'm forgetting the exact name of the type of factory down there. There's 3 types of factories. The blue ones shoot these bullets in a radial pattern around them, but there's gaps that you can get through, or you can weapon dodge through them anyway. And when you destroy the factory, all of their bullets also go away. The green factories, which are bigger and beefier, are orbital factories, where they have these nodes spawning around them, and the red ones are vector factories, where the nodes shoot straight at you. The good thing about the nodes on the orbital and vector factories is they will actually keep your chain going. They won't count towards the chain, but they will stop it from expiring. They'll reset the timeout on it. Anyway, we've got Mr. Bond going into Vespula, Vespula Plus, that is. We have seen this fight a couple of times in Bingo already, so let's see how he fares. He already took an unfortunate knockdown, which, again, it's really easy to get swarmed and overwhelmed by the Wasps. But Mr. Bond trying to keep the pressure on. He just says, I don't care about the first battery, and opts for the second one. So, I believe this change was made a few years ago, but when you're fighting bosses, if you leave one of their batteries out and then complete another phase of the boss, it will actually despawn the battery that was already out and spawn a new one. I think the way it used to work is it wouldn't spawn a new one and it would keep the original one out, but it was way too easy to end up missing the battery that way. Because batteries only stay on the field for, I think, 10 seconds and then they despawn. So popping out a new one was an attempt to make it less likely that you would be forced into battery attrition. But Mr. Bond is sailing into the last phase of the Vespula fight. Meanwhile, Moons is in the third phase right now. And takes Moon also getting roughed up by the Wasps there. Meanwhile, we now have a significant margin even between second and third, where Moons is pretty much almost halfway through Vespula, and Walter is just starting it. But seriously, shoutouts to Walter. I think he said in the interview after the third round of Bingo, or no, second round of Bingo, I can count, that he hasn't speedrun this game in a long time. He definitely was a front runner of speedrunning this game back a couple years ago. But for him to be keeping this kind of pace while not running it in a speedrun capacity, in a full campaign speedrun capacity in a while is pretty good. So Mr. Bond is into Checkpoint now, the first map of the third zone. I really like this map, just in general. I find the maps that feel like an actual progression as opposed to an arena, I find those to be really interesting, and there's only 2 of them in the entire game. Rotation plays a big part in this map too, because this map is effectively rotated somewhere around like 170 degrees from the original. In the original one, you walk due east. In this one, you're walking up and to the left. And yeah, the reskins of the bosses are really cool. I explained Dark Embryo like as being the origin of Embryo Plus earlier, but yeah, they clearly took this sort of dark motif to all the bosses for Campaign Plus. So at this point, we've got Walter onto the last phase. Oh man, he was running low on battery because he must have skipped one, but he got the battery dropped by the 5th phase with a few seconds left to spare. And meanwhile, we've got Lord Doctor into the is that the second phase, just about into the third. Yeah, okay. Meanwhile, Mr. Bond is into the final arena of Checkpoint. The map does actually kind of end off in an arena-ish setting, more like the other levels. And the original version of this map introduces the laser turret, but we're getting maser turrets all over the place in the Plus version of Checkpoint. And also Buster Titans instead of Bomber Titans. And also we've got Hyper Drones over here. I didn't talk about drones. So the white drones are the easier, normal version of drones, and then the Hyper Drones are the red versions, who tend to dodge bullets much more easily, and they shoot 3 bullets at you instead of 1. So Mr. Bond has cleared Checkpoint and is into Transit. Transit is kind of a rude map on principle to begin with. It is another map that we are seeing initially rotated roughly 170 degrees, but it will also rotate multiple times during the level, and each of those rotations is different. And there's going to be one where that plays a very key factor in just I don't know, a few seconds, because it's actually starting to rotate right now. So, meanwhile, I see Lord Doctor clearing Vespula, so we will have all players into Zone 3 shortly. So you'll notice now that we've got the cart rolling north, or upwards, on Mr. Bond's screen. You'll also notice that, well, aside from the laser turrets, there are lasers coming from the left side of the screen, from these things on the wall that we're on the tunnel that we're traveling through. This is a marked difference from regular campaign. In regular campaign, those come from the top. Those are going vertically from the top of the screen. So they'll scroll in from the right and go towards the left. The thing about that is, given the widescreen nature of this game, you have way less warning when they're going top to bottom rather than right to left. So that in itself kind of increases the difficulty just naturally due to having less warning. You do still have an audio cue when the lasers power up. So there is that, but you have less visual cue on it. Meanwhile, Mr. Bond getting roughed up a bit by the Buster Titans there, unfortunately. Meanwhile, Moon is on the last leg of checkpoint, as is Walter. So Moon and Walter are going to be vying for second versus third now, looks like. But Moon currently still in second. And meanwhile, Lord Doctor in the long corridor earlier on in checkpoints. And Mr. Bond continuing through Transit, which now has mine tanks. In the original version of Transit, it only has Wasp tanks. So yeah, just there's an abundance of enemies even in the original version of this, and this is the first level that you to lose battery in if you're in immediate level in. But on Plus, just that much harder because you throw everything at you. We see Moon when that earlier when I first got to it. My body is through. This was the level that we unfortunately saw somebody play the non-plus version when they were supposed to be playing the plus version before in round 2 of the bingo races. And you can easily tell because in the regular version of Heat, the flame is red, which means it damages both enemies and yourself. Whereas in the plus version, it is blue, which means it only damages you. It's not going to do you any favors. It can actually be pretty useful. The red flame can be pretty useful in the regular version of the stage because it can easily, like, finish off a keg or kill wasps that you couldn't get to. It can also deal with mines, like the ones that we just saw on Mr. Bond's screen right as I was talking about that. Whereas the blue flames aren't going to help you at all. But Bond got through that pretty quickly regardless. And meanwhile, we've got Lord Doctor finishing up his checkpoint. We've got Moons, who should be closing in on the end of Transit pretty soon. And Walter also a decent chunk into Transit right now. I guess I can talk about battery drops a little bit because we just saw one of the batteries sort of zoom into Mr. Bond. When you have Accelerate, it also, in addition to making you run faster, it also makes weapon energy and battery pickups attract to you faster. On top of that, if you're really low on battery, there's sort of like a last-ditch effort battery attract that'll happen if you're really low, where it'll kind of like zip to you from much farther away than it normally would. So the game does have ways to try to cater to people who are having more trouble completing levels. Meanwhile, Mr. Bond is now onto the other conveyor belt level. This is called Revolution. You can probably guess why. And these conveyors, we've got 2 conveyors in this level. One on the closest ring to the center and one on the second to outermost ring. So it basically alternates between moving and not. The one really interesting thing they did on this level, between Campaign and Campaign Plus, is you'll notice that sometimes turrets are going to spawn on the moving conveyor. That never happened in the regular campaign. In the regular campaign, turrets only ever spawn directly in the center of the level. So that's a really interesting way to change this up, just in terms of enemy placement. Because normally turrets can't move, but by being on a moving conveyor, suddenly they can. And it's also interesting because sometimes you will see a turret effectively kind of like... Normally the turret's lasers rotate, and sometimes on this level you'll notice they basically don't. I think we just saw it there on Mr. Bond's screen, actually. Because the rotation caused by the rotating conveyor ends up kind of canceling out the rotation that the turret normally performs itself. But yeah, we've got all sorts of enemies going on here. We've got Fetch Fidos, we've got Buster Titans, we've got Banshee Specters, which shoot those arcs of multiple arcs of blue bullets that we're seeing on Mr. Bond's screen. We've got Orbital Factories, which Bond is trying to prioritize taking down so that they don't get out of hand too much. We've got Mine Canisters. We've got Starch being set on fire on Moonspod's screen as he changes levels. That was pretty funny. So Moon is also into Revolution now, whereas Lord Doctor actually just moved into Heat at the same time, and Walter is almost finished with Heat right now. So we still maintain the Bond in first, Moon's in second, Walter in third, Lord Doctor in fourth. But again, everybody at a respectable pace in terms of proximity to each other. Meanwhile, Mr. Bond is on the Justice Plus fight now. Justice has 3 phases as opposed to the earlier boss's 6, which means you are going to get fewer batteries from him, because batteries always drop after each phase. So by nature of having 3 phases instead of 6, you're going to get only 2 batteries instead of 5. Also, Justice fires his lasers faster. In the first phase, he fires, I think, 1 more of the balls that try to chain to you. And basically just everything is faster and more in your face more immediately. I believe on the last phase of Justice also, you'll notice that when he kills the turret posts, the fence posts that start up the blue lasers, on the regular Justice fight, I believe every single one of those will drop a power-up, whereas on Justice Plus, only every other one does. But no problem for Mr. Bond, he is through it. And moving on into Zone 4. The first level in Zone 4 is Assembly. Aptly named because you'll see these platforms swapping in and out frequently. This one is also rotated from its version in the campaign, the regular campaign. And I believe we will also be seeing a couple different types of platforms that don't show up in the regular campaign. So, like, there's a wide variety of platforms. You'll see half platforms, you'll see platforms with a small hole in the middle, you'll see platforms with 4 posts on it. But you'll also, in this version, see platforms with a single large post on it, and you'll see platforms with a larger hole, so it's like a thinner ring than any of the platforms you would have seen in the regular campaign. Also, with this is about at the point where the game really starts to no longer care about your feelings as a player. I mean, even on regular campaign, this level just gets kind of long and grueling compared to any levels before it. And that's going to be even more true on Campaign Plus with the amount of increased stuff they're throwing at you. Meanwhile, Moon just now moving on to Justice, while Walter and Lord Doctor are both in Revolution. Moon getting touched up by some lasers already in Phase 1 of his Justice fight. And opting for a shutdown from one of the posts that dropped a power-up, and getting a firepower power-up from the second. One thing to note about the power-ups is they will actually cycle, so both before and after they spawn, in fact. Before they spawn, I think they're on a tighter timer. After they spawn, I think it's every... forget if it's 10 or 15 seconds. And you'll actually see, if you look really closely at the power-ups, there's actually like a radial indicator around them that shows when they're going to cycle to the next power-up, and it always cycles red, yellow, blue, red, yellow, blue. So Moon's into the final phase, and the final laser, the final head of Justice's final phase. So should be fine, just needs to finish him off with some missiles, and he's done with Justice. So Moons will be heading on to Assembly to join Mr. Bond there. Meanwhile, Mr. Bond in Laser Town at the moment. And Walter facing off with the last phase of Justice and just finishing that right now as well. So 3 of our 4 players into Zone 4 momentarily. And Mr. Bond is into Relay, which is the one other level that is more of a progression rather than an arena. And just like with Checkpoint, which was the first level of that type, we have been rotated. In this case, I think we've been rotated a perfect 180, because you move right at the start in the regular campaign, and you move left at the start in this version. However, there will be some other rotations that differ in this version from the original. So I'll try to call those out when we get to them. Meanwhile, Lord Doctor now starting his Justice fight. I think Lord Doctor actually just picked up a shutdown right in the nick of time to avoid getting hit by that laser. Oh, wow, I think he actually... Okay, I thought he only fires out 5 of the tethering balls, but I think he actually fires out 6 of them, so that's 2 more than regular campaign on Phase 1 of Justice. I honestly couldn't count when I played this. Meanwhile, Mr. Bond now on the elevator. So, fun fact about this elevator... the level did a 180-degree rotation on him when he boarded that elevator. In the regular campaign version of that, it actually only rotates 90 degrees. It goes from facing right to facing up, whereas this went from facing left to facing right. So that gives an interesting, different feel to the last part of this level as well, because you're oriented 90 degrees differently than you were in the original. Lord Doctor is through with his Justice fight, so we will have all players in Zone 4. As we've still got Moons and Walter working on Assembly, and Mr. Bond closing in towards the end of Relay. So Mr. Bond has got a pretty healthy pace going on right now. But again, Mr. Bond has had some specific Campaign Plus practice. Mr. Bond does speedruns of this game basically every Sunday night. I don't know whether he'll be doing them tonight too, given that he's been in this event today, but I believe he normally starts at 8 p.m. Eastern. So Mr. Bond is actually Quest for Semi-Glory on Twitch. So if you're interested to see someone who speedruns this regularly, definitely toss him a follow. As well as our other runners, because they're all really good at this game. But Mr. Bond, I will say, streams this with the most regularity. I should also mention that Mr. Bond and Toucan Sam we saw earlier in the first bingo round, speedran this at SGDQ 2017, so you can find that on YouTube. I also commentated that. So we've got Mr. Bond into Focus now. Focus consists of a series of circular platforms, one right under the other. So as we see certain waves of enemies completed, we will see the platform break out and you fall down to the next one. Meanwhile, we've got Moons on the relay elevator. Walter is on the first half of relay right now. And Lord Dr. PhD is still working on the end of assembly here. And Mr. Bond just dropped down into the danger zone, which has this blue flame coming out. It is also blue on the regular version of the campaign, so that much is similar. And it always starts in the same place. Like, you don't have to blindly guess at where it'll be rotated. It always starts facing the same direction. I didn't realize that for a while, and then I felt silly when I found out. I always just erred on the side of caution and tried to be around the outside when the platform drops. And interestingly, this part of Focus normally has Wasp tanks, but those are replaced with Mine tanks because why not? This is Campaign Plus. And you'll notice when he dropped into the... this should be the last platform in the level. The flame on this level was on this platform was in the same place as the flame on the previous. So there's, again, no nasty surprises there. Although I feel like they missed an opportunity for just trolling players on Campaign Plus. They could have done something to change that up. I was actually surprised they decided to be consistent there. Or considerate. Meanwhile, we've got Moons finishing up Relay. Right as Mr. Bond is about to finish up Focus. So they've got about a level between them. Of course, levels vary in how long they take to complete. For instance, I definitely expect that Repeater may take a bit longer. Which is what Mr. Bond is into now. Repeater is a really interesting level in terms of just level generation. A lot of people who are familiar with the game Bastion like to call this the Bastion level when they're seeing this for the first time. Because that was a very signature design of Bastion, was that the ground always forms out tile by tile in front of you. And that's basically what's happening here. Again, I will remind people, this was called out to me when I was playing Campaign Plus for the first time. This is the one level that was designed by Sickle on the development team. And Sickle likes to make players cry, because back in early access, he suggested having a level that just was basically bombs dropping on people over and over again. Which we are seeing plenty of mine canisters here, to be fair. So, yeah, we are seeing some of that. Now Mr. Bond is getting into what I consider one of the most critical parts of this level, which has a few Mazer turrets going on. Oh, actually, that one formed in a really... That one on the top right of his screen there formed in a really convenient spot in terms of not getting hit by it. What tends to happen pretty often is, if you move around a lot in this part of the level, you'll end up with Mazer turrets that are able to hit you from a mile away, and you don't really have a good indication of where they're actually at. So Mr. Bond handled that pretty well, and is now beyond that phase. I feel like it's very easy to lose time on that part. And I definitely, when I was playing this, I received advice that it is advisable to avoid moving around like a raving lunatic, because that is just going to cause the level to form up in ways that you don't want it to, and you'll end up with enemies very far away, and it'll be a bad time. Especially on certain particular waves where the level forms up in ways that are unfavorable, like lots of walls that block your movement, especially when we've got mines coming down like this. And that's a thing to consider even in the original version of Repeater for the regular campaign as well. Meanwhile, it looks like we've got Lord Doctor at the end of Relay. Yeah, he's just about finished. And we've got Moonspot and Walter both on near the end of Focus. I think Moonspot is on the last platform. I'm unsure. Walter's on the second to last platform. I see another one under that. Meanwhile, Bond is through Repeater Plus into Venom. So Venom has an interesting history because in early access, they actually decided to tone down his bullet patterns. But of course, for Campaign Plus, to make it more difficult, they toned it up again. I feel like there are certain parts of Venom's patterns that feel very like Ikaruga or something like that. They feel very bullet hell-esque. And it's interesting to see how they change things up in Campaign Plus. So, like, for example, these turrets fire in more directions simultaneously than they did in the regular campaign version of Venom. The Spindly Doodle here, again, shoutouts to Moonspot for that name. The Spindly Doodle in Phase 3 is more like the Spindly Doodle in Phase 6 of the original Venom fight. And then Phase 4, in both versions of the Venom fight, Phase 4 is effectively 2 turrets instead of 1 on the outside. So Phases 4, 5, and 6 are basically more intense versions of Phases 1, 2, and 3. And both Campaign and Campaign Plus have the same number of turrets on these phases. It's just how they shoot their bullets that's different. Phase 5 can be really troublesome because you have to keep an eye on what's coming at you, but you also have to keep an eye on like where you need to be targeting. So Mr. Bond got through that pretty well. Now he's into the second Spindly Doodle phase, which also has a stream of dark bullets. The dark bullets will pretty much guaranteed knock you down in one shot. Of course, that's not saying much for Venom because a lot of his light bullet patterns are also so dense that they will also knock you down immediately anyway. Yes, the Spindly Doodle. And now we have the butt phase, and I call it the butt phase because the developers actually approved of that name for it during one of our previous events, where we've got Venom butt stomping, which, yeah, that got Mr. Bond good right there, and spitting out webs that slow you down. And now we're into the final phase, so we've basically been kind of deconstructing Venom leg by leg, and then butt by butt, I guess. But he's only got one of those, and then he just kind of like flops onto the stage and tries to, you know, throw up on us a bit. Yeah, Mr. Bond is through with the Venom fight now. And on to Centrifuge, the first level of Zone 5, which is the final zone. We saw the regular version of Centrifuge a few times during the bingo races before, but this is Centrifuge Plus. I would say it is decidedly harder to carve through enemies in this version than the original. But at this point, the game starts to have a bit more similarity between Campaign and Campaign Plus, because at this point of Campaign, the game is throwing almost everything it has at you anyway. Whereas on Campaign Plus, the game is throwing everything it has at you from square one, as opposed to the original campaign having an intended difficulty curve and introducing new enemies as you progress through it. In Campaign Plus, you basically see every enemy in the game within like the first 2 or 3 stages. Meanwhile, we've got, checking up on the other racers, we've got Moonspot onto the 4th phase of Venom. We've got Walter and Lord Doctor both partway through Repeater. So, Mr. Bond continuing to extend his lead bit by bit here. One thing I realize I have not looked out for is I don't know that we've seen any players actually have to restart a level yet. Because as long as you're not playing for S+, which we're not, rank doesn't matter for speedruns. At least for regular speedruns. You shouldn't have a need to explicitly restart unless you actually fail a level. And there's one level towards the end of the game that could give players some trouble. It likes to be kind of rude. I will definitely be explaining that one when we get there. We're not there yet. But keep that in mind for, I don't know, somewhere around 10 minutes from now, maybe even less, because Mr. Bond is actually already through Centrifuge. And moving on to Control. We saw Control a couple times in the race also. We saw Mr. Bond play Control Plus, which is this level, in first-person view before. We saw other players play the regular version of Control, which, if you'll remember, if you were here for that, I talked about the 3 different types of turrets that are in this level. And in regular Control, the turret that is closest to where you spawn, near the bottom of the level, is a machine gun turret. However, on Campaign Plus, that machine gun turret is up here at the right side of the level. So this is another level that they rotated for Campaign Plus. This one I totally saw coming when I was playing through the campaign. So I was like, alright, you've rotated a bunch of levels. I fully expect you're going to rotate Control. And sure enough, they did. And they put, this was probably intentional on their part if I had to guess, they put the turret that speedrunners use the absolute least closest to where you start. Because the plasma field, the turret down there is basically a bigger version of Coral's plasma field secondary. And it's just, it requires you to stay close to enemies, and that's a really bad time, especially when you've got Titans spawning on you. It's just not going to be safe. So you'll see most runners tend to favor the set it and forget it machine gun turret, which is what we're seeing Mr. Bond do right now. There's also a missile turret at the top left, or top middle to left of the screen in this version. It's on the right side in the original version of the level. I tend to favor that one equally as much as the autogun turret, because the autogun you can just step on it once and it'll keep firing until it exhausts its ammunition and has to recharge. So that's, to me, that's usually a good time to go and use the missile turret to lay on additional damage. And the missile and plasma field turrets, you have direct control of exactly when they start and stop. You have to be standing on them for them to fire. But that also makes them more dangerous. Meanwhile, it looks like Mr. Bond did just take it down there from one of the Buster Titans. You know, there's a lot going on right now. And by this part of the game, even in regular campaign, there is a lot going on. And this can definitely seem intimidating to people who are new to the game, or new to the genre. But just keep in mind that, like, one, we're seeing Campaign Plus, which is intentionally difficult. And two, we're seeing runners who have put hundreds, if not thousands of hours into this game. And are really, you know, veterans of it. So we're seeing some very, you know, efficient play. A lot of efficient weapon swap dodging, which again is super important. A lot of aggressive play to stay close to enemies to kill them as fast as possible. Which is more crucial with Starch, who Moonspot is playing as, than with Cactus. With Cactus, it's obviously important because of the flamethrower's limited range, but with Starch, the closer you are to enemies, the more damage your laser will deal to them. So point blanking is kind of an intentional thing you want to be doing with Starch. So Mr. Bond is into convection, which we saw this a few times in the bingo races as well. The gimmick here is that these jets on the floor light up in different patterns. And on Convection Plus, we actually see multiple patterns overlapping a lot more often. So, like, these jets are lighting up under Cactus's feet right now, but they're also lighting up in patterns as they go across and around the board. A couple important things to note about these jets is, one, they're red, which means they damage both you and enemies. And the other thing is, they will not kill you instantly. Like, when you first come into the stage, you might assume, oh god, I need to stay off of those at all costs. They look dangerous. But they are dangerous, but they are more of a slow cook than an instant kill. So meanwhile, we've got all four players in different levels right now. We've got Mr. Bond in Convection, we've got Moonspot in Control, we've got Walter in Centrifuge, and we've got Lord Doctor just about done with Venom. So again, we will have all players in the same zone shortly, but yeah, there is definitely quite a bit of a spread between first and fourth at this point. But it has been consistent, like, the placements of players have been consistent throughout this entire race. There hasn't been any changing of hands. And again, shout outs to everybody for keeping on this pace to begin with. Because sub-hour, especially in Campaign Plus, is a pretty good benchmark. I've only speedrun this game a bit, and I haven't touched speedrunning Campaign Plus. I think that would be way more than I'm up for. But I only have a 55 with Starch on the regular campaign, and like people who are really good at this have like 45 or less with Starch on the regular campaign. I believe Cactus, it's also possible to sub 50. Bond has probably a 49 or a 48 with Cactus, if not better than that. So just to give you perspective on, you know, how much more Campaign Plus does throw at you, it is taking, you know, it is going to take players closer to an hour. Meanwhile, we still have each player on a separate stage, and we have Mr. Bond going into Collider, which is the stage that gives runners nightmares. Interestingly, Collider, the enemy formations in Collider for the first part of the stage are very similar to Campaign, the regular campaign, except that each phase tends to add one new type of enemy to it. So, like, the first phase had Bomber Titans, Hyper Drones, and it added Banshee Spectres, who were not in the first wave on the regular campaign. The second wave always had Reaper Spectres and Orbital Factories, but it also added turrets. The third phase is real funny to me because the third phase was the one time in the entire regular campaign that you would see a single Maser turret on one-player campaign. And in this, they add more Mazer turrets. They also add Wasp canisters. So it's like, oh, you thought that was going to be the only Mazer turret. Well, here, have another, and another. And you get a Mazer turret, and you get a Mazer turret. And now we're on to the fourth wave, which has the other two types of factories. And also adds mines, because why not? Oh, man, one of them got Mr. Bond right there. Mr. Bond paying attention to pick up a accelerate before the main event, I would say, of this stage, which is the fight against Licorice. You will notice on Mr. Bond's screen, there is now a battery at the bottom of the screen. That is because Licorice is an android, like you. She shares the same characteristics. She can pick up power-ups. She can pick up weapon energy. She can pick up batteries. This stage only ends when Licorice runs out of battery. And to make matters worse, the one way in which she differs is if there is a battery on the field when she runs out of battery, she will not actually run out of battery until that battery gets picked up by either her or you. So that's a little bit cheeky by the developers. But other than that, it's more or less a quote-unquote fair fight, except that, of course, you can easily get burned by which enemy decides to drop the battery. So Mr. Bond is just trying to keep Licorice down whenever he gets the chance, and always be close to enemies that are about to get killed so that he picks up the battery, so that he's closer to it. I think I saw Licorice get one battery. You have to figure that each battery that Licorice picks up is going to easily waste somewhere between 15 and 30 seconds. But it looks like he has done it. No, he did not. Yes, he did. Okay. I saw charging at the bottom right after the round ended. That scared me for a second, but I guess that's the thing that normally happens in the cutscene where she flies away. So I just got totally juked by the game doing its normal thing. Okay, no. So that's good. He had a pretty smooth Licorice fight. Losing one battery to her is, you know, acceptable unless you're going against a gold standard of never losing batteries to her. And the reason why that stage gives players nightmares, speedrunners nightmares, is it's the second to last stage of the game. So it's like you go through this entire game for, 40 or 50 minutes, and then you get to this thing, and if she takes too many batteries, if your battery luck is just terrible, and you don't do good damage control, you're just going to lose, like, half a minute to a minute of time on that one fight. But Mr. Bond is into Medulla, which is the final zone of the game. And we just saw him finish the second phase, which was the Embryo refight. Again, Medulla has 3 boss refights, which each involve playing against the last phase of the first 3 bosses of the game. So you alternate between a phase where you're fighting Medulla and a phase where you're fighting doing a boss refight. So he's into the Vestibule refight right now. Soon to be into the third Medulla phase, let's call it. But the 5th phase overall. And this one shoots a whole bunch of dark bullets at you, which again, dark bullets will knock you down immediately. But he gets through that without much of an issue. Now he is into the Justice refight. Now, the Justice refight on Medulla always only gives you a power-up on every second fence that you destroy. Or like first, third, fifth, that sort of thing. Whereas in the original campaign Justice fight, every fence would do that, but in the fight on Justice on Campaign Plus, it does every other fence as well. Now he's into the last phase of the Medulla fight itself, which has all these tentacles trying to thwomp you and all these little things popping up and throwing up plasma fields of their own. And also lasers, don't forget the lasers. And nope, we're not quite done yet, because there is still the I can't believe it's not Geometry Wars phase. This is where the game fools you into thinking you're done, but you're actually not. And this phase has completely different formations than the original campaign Medulla fight. It has a lot more phases that involve enemies starting all around the perimeter and coming in towards you, so you really have to be on your weapon swap dodging A game to avoid taking damage. It also features more of the laser firing enemies than the original campaign version. And then there's these big cubes that just have really big explosions, but I believe Mr. Bond is already on the last phase. Yep, there we go. One cube almost escaped. But there we go. Mr. Bond will be done in a matter of seconds once he hits the complete button on the final clear screen. And there you go. He is done in 1 hour and 21 seconds. GG to Mr. Bond. And I see Mr. Bond is actually already in the wings, ready to talk about how things went.
About how trash that run was?
I mean, okay, you missed the sub-hour by 21 seconds, but come on.
I did. It's not great, but you know what? I'll take it.
What is your PB right now? Because I know you have done a few Campaign Plus races. Not races, but
I think this might actually be a PB for my Cactus run.
Oh, wow.
I know it was a flat hour and something. I don't know where it fell on the 21 side of things.
All right, well, yeah, you were consistently... We didn't really have any changes of hands in this. You were consistently... inching ahead all along. We've got Moons in second, who is now on the Vestibule refight. We've got Walter in third, who is just getting to the licorice part of Collider right now, and we've got Lord Dr. PhD, who is finishing up Convection at the moment.
Ooh, well, I certainly felt like I was behind for most of it, considering how bad of a start that was. It's like 2 or 3 downs on Descent is like, ugh.
Moons, you and Moons were actually like neck and neck starting a couple of the stages in the first zone.
I think transit was really slow too. It's so easy on a lot of these Campaign Plus levels to just lose all of your momentum from a down or a series of downs.
I was talking about that specifically during Repeater because I was paying attention to how you fared with the turret phase of that. Because I feel like in my casual playthrough of Campaign Plus, I felt like that was just a place where you would... Like, I had to restart it a few times because I just knew I lost way too much time there. And aside from you having one turret who was semi-conveniently placed behind a wall so it couldn't actually kill you, it seemed like that phase didn't go too badly.
I think it was one of the Zone 5 levels where I ate the last rocket that was appearing on screen. Like, I went right for it.
I don't think I noticed that one. I'm trying to think of the ones that... I did notice a couple of knockdowns in Zone 5. Meanwhile, we've got Moon halfway through the final regular Medulla phase here. And we've got Walter through the licorice fight. The licorice fight was the part I was going to be the most concerned with for people. I didn't actually catch Moons because I think I was watching you play Medulla.
I know she managed to get 1 battery from me.
Yeah.
Which is pretty par for the course.
I was going to say, like, 1 battery, I was like, I feel like most runners would settle for that unless they're really going against, like, gold splits with no batteries. But that's also, like, why it's the runner's worst nightmare, because it's right near the end of the game. And then you have that to contend with. I haven't noticed if anybody has actually had to restart any levels. That was the one thing I realized I didn't have enough of a careful eye on. I wonder, like, if there were a place for that to happen, Collider would be it, I feel like, but... We've got Moons onto Geometry Wars phase, and we've got Walter onto phase 3, it looks like, of Medulla. And we've got Lord Doctor trying to... Oh no. I didn't want to finish that sentence because I thought it was going to be the commentator's curse, and I think it was anyway. Because Licorice just picked up that battery. Yeah, so Moon's finished with a 104.22. Moons was actually playing a Starch. But he got a 104.22. Walter is going to hopefully be not too far behind. And Lord Doctor can still get a pretty strong time here. Because I mean, let's be fair. I can't really compare this with Campaign Plus, but like when people start out running this game, I think like hour and 10 times or so are common. So
Yeah,
like,
it does take a long time to get a consistent sub 1, certainly. That's kind of the first plateau to hit.
yeah. But yeah, are there any other thoughts that you had about this run?
On top of a series of stupid downs on a number of levels, it was okay for the most part.
Hey Moons, good job on placing second.
Hi.
GG.
I knew you'd win one.
I'm just rooting for Lord Doctor to finish off Licorice here, because Licorice keeps...
so close.
Damn it,
Dang.
again. Licorice keeps getting all the battery luck at the last second.
Please.
Yeah, okay, that was the second time I said so. The second one, I didn't say anything, but the first and third ones might have been my fault. Oh no.
Have you been jinxing him, have you?
I hope not. Okay, he got that battery. So he's still in the fight. Meanwhile, Walter is onto, I can't believe it's not Geometry Wars.
Everyone, what levels do you find harder? Because I feel like the first levels are the harder ones.
Yeah,
Weirdly.
Descent, definitely. Just trying to get into the swing of it. I took, I think, probably 2 or 3 downs in it, and it's really terrible.
I mean, I guess there is worth considering that there's not really any ramp-up time because it's just immediately hard mode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, we have Walter in here now as well, as we see him finishing on the stream.
Okay.
To see the victory spin.
GG.
Walter making his own spindly doodle.
Yeah.
So GG on third place, Walter, and Lord Doctor is just starting his Medulla fight now. So Lord Doctor did survive Collider, but got sassed by Licorice a bunch, which is the thing that we always hate to see happen. But yeah, Walter, how was your run? How did you feel about it?
Feels very poorly. Very, very bad.
You finished without presumably restarting any levels, so that's...
Yeah, non-accidentally restarting, yeah. just tiny bit tilted that I get hit half the time. That's that bit.
That's true. One strategy that I remember seeing suggested, or maybe I suggested it, I don't remember, is to just turn off Pro Mode altogether so that you're not tempted to hit the R key, because R key will restart.
Yeah.
But only if you have that turned on.
Yeah.
Huh. Didn't know that. I just know it's there.
I've trained myself at this point. At this point, I've trained myself to not press the restart key and just pause the game and wait for a second instead.
I forget, is there a controller equivalent to the R key?
Yeah, you press back.
There is.
Oh, okay, that's
the
right.
back button. I've had that fat fingered a couple times during good runs, and it's a ticket to tilt.
Mm. Who did you play, Bond, by the way?
I went with Cactus, just because I needed the boss melting of the flamethrower.
Right.
I actually couldn't remember whether we had like determined that everyone was going to play Cactus, and then I saw Moons do Starch, and I was like, well, if he's doing Starch, I guess they could pick whoever they wanted.
Yeah, I thought it was any
Yeah,
character.
we never talked about it before.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was just any character. I just took Cactus as well.
But yeah, Starch or Cactus definitely seem like they would be the most safe picks overall.
Yeah. Until you get to Licorice, and then it's anybody's game.
Then I feel like I would be less safe with
Not
Cactus.
handle that well.
Yeah. I feel like I would rather Starch than Cactus for that.
I like Holly and Starch against Licorice. That's me.
Aubergine's okay too.
Yeah, it's all about being able to just stand behind shit.
Yeah. Also, Licorice is okay.
Redirect fire is definitely a thing.
I picked Licorice when we did the relay specifically because I was like, I know I can actually beat Licorice with Licorice.
Yeah, the counter slash is definitely a strong strat.
Because enemy Licorice always fully charges the slash, and when you play as Licorice, you can decide to charge it or quick slash, and you can actually quick slash multiple times in succession. So you can just be like, oh, you're gonna do that? Well, nope.
Yeah, an instant downer.
Funny, Licorice is usually the instant downer anyway. But...
She does have a rather pessimistic mood.
Big mood. Meanwhile, we've got Lord Doctor on the final phase. What do you all think in terms of, like, the kind of, like, are there any changes that they made? And we've got Lord Doctor finished, so GG to everybody. Lord Doctor just a hair above 110. Still below 111, so pretty strong finish for everybody, managing to be within the range of 110 or less. But what do you all think about, like, in terms of what they changed? Are there particular things that stand out to you in Campaign Plus?
The amount of bombs is significant.
Yeah, the amount of bombs and then some of the morphing levels being a lot tighter. Influx, Repeater.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, Repeater's one of my least favorites. I don't like how that level changes now.
Designed by Sickle.
Yeah, Repeater feels like one of the hardest maps now, by far.
When we were testing Cactus Plus stuff, we found that I can't remember exactly what it was, but the limit for virtual player count was a bit wacky. So it was spawning a lot of enemies, and it was so much fun to play. It's great with Peanut.
But yeah, I definitely felt like some of the rotations they did on the levels were notable.
The bosses were also going to be rotated at one point.
Huh.
Oh man.
I wonder how much of an effect that would
have.
It was just awkward to start with, and then you just get used to it, really. So that, I guess, didn't really make it.
I mean, by the time I got to Control when I was first playing it, I was like, I totally expect them to rotate this. And yeah, they did. They made it look like it wasn't, but it was.
Start with you where you don't want to be.
Yeah, they specifically put the turret that speedrunners never use at the starting point. I still think one of the most interesting changes... Oh, go ahead.
I feel like Relay being rotated is kind of a big FU too, because once you get to the elevator, it rotates back to normal, and you get this 270-degree spin of.
It's a very fast spin, yeah.
Yeah.
The thing that I find the most interesting, I think, is the turret placement on Revolution. The fact that the turrets can spawn on the rotating conveyors, that I thought was just like genius. It's like you make this one subtle change that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, both that and process. As soon as the turrets go down, you hightail it over there and nuke them right away, because you are going to have a bad time.
Yeah. Hey, Lord Doctor.
Hey, guys.
Hey, man.
GG.
GG.
Yeah, how do you think it went?
Oh my, I think I messed up quite a lot, but overall I was enjoying myself, so that's the main thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. I think we all felt pretty... I don't know about Borden, but I feel like me and Walter both said that we didn't feel too great about it.
Yeah, it was a
Oh no,
long time
I was definitely tilted from the word go.
Okay, well, there you go.
All right, well, I know what not to say to Mr. Bond now, apparently.
Lasers? Yes.
No, I meant the word go, but...
Oh.
But yeah,
Yeah,
thanks
but it's
everybody
quite
for
different.
running. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to say it's quite different to just go to the whole campaign in one go instead of repeatedly playing the same levels until I get S+. It's a whole different thing.
Yeah, and I think this was probably the first time a few of you did the whole campaign end to end like this. Like Mr. Bond has done practice for a couple of sessions now.
I've only done the S plus on the maps. I haven't actually tried them in a row, and then you notice how hard some of them are. Like, what your problems you had with it.
Yeah. Yeah, but Campaign Plus is much more entertaining in this way, I think, than the standard campaign.
Bond, did you
Because the
PB?
standard- What?
I think Mr. Bond
I
PB.
think so.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Nice.
I don't know. I can check real quick, I guess.
But yeah, again, just to point out to people who are watching who feel intimidated by this, this is Campaign Plus, which was specifically designed to be brutal, because players asked for it. The main campaign that you first play through, like I'm pretty sure Campaign Plus doesn't even unlock until you play the main campaign through. And the main campaign definitely has, it's specifically designed to have a difficulty curve, whereas Campaign Plus just throws the difficulty curve mostly out the window, and it's just like how much it wants you to have a bad time curve instead of difficulty curve. And again, this game is available on 4 platforms: PC, Switch. Those 2 have the Plus version right now, Xbox One, and PS4, and I believe there's demos on all 4 of them, so if this interests you, check them out.
Yeah, I did look it up. It turns out that was a PB by 30-some seconds.
All right.
Nice. Well done. I think we're good, right?
Yep.
Yeah. If anyone else has anything they want to add before we sign off.
I am incredibly tired. That's me. So everyone have a good day. I'm sleeping.
All right. Thanks for being here for it, Walter.
It was nice.
Cool.
GG's, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Have a good one, everybody. So that about wraps it up for this event. Thank you, everybody who watched. And again, if you want, follow these runners. We've got Mr. Bond, who is Quest for Semi-Glory. We've got Moonspod. We've got Walter X8. Let me double check if his name is different on Twitch. He is the Walter X8 on Twitch, I believe. And we've got Lord Dr. PhD, who is SS Slide Master. That is Slide Master with 3 S's at the beginning, total. So hope everyone had a good time. Bond really is the chosen one. And thanks to everybody who watched. Thanks to all the rest of the runners who participated in bingo and also hung around to watch the rest of it. But that is going to do it for now. So I believe we are going to call this stream a wrap right now. So have a good one, everybody, and be sure to turn out for future events on the Speed Gaming channels. We just saw the links posted in chat just a couple minutes ago, so check those out. And that is going to do it, so have a great rest of your weekend, everybody.